Hey everybody, it's Michael, and I want to thank you for engaging with local church in this way. Whether it's your first time or you've been around for a while, at the end of this episode, I'm going to encourage you to engage with us in 3 additional ways. So stick around for that. But for now, I hope that the following content is helpful and inspires you to take your next step on your faith journey.
My name is Emily, and I am thrilled to be here for part 2 of this series called Grace. We just started this series last week. I love Grace. I love the concept of it. I love that we're doing this series, taking time to explore what I think is like the central kind of foundation of our faith is this concept of grace. And not grace like the prayer you pray before dinner. I know for me growing up, when I first started thinking about grace, it was that. I always thought when people talked about grace, they were talking about praying before food. But we're talking about a different kind of grace. And if you were here last week, you know that because Michael defined grace last week as unmerited favor. Unmerited favor. This is something that we get from God, is unmerited favor. It's undeserved love, undeserved kindness, undeserved approval, attention, affection, undeserved grace. Grace in and of itself is undeserved. You can't earn it, you can't work for it, you can't win it. It's a gift that you do not deserve. That's the whole concept of grace, which is unique because most faith traditions, there isn't a God who just gives things that we don't deserve. There's an earning that happens. And that's what makes Christianity different. Christianity is getting things we don't deserve, which is really why I think grace is one of the most important and beautiful parts of our faith. It's so beautiful that God would choose to give us things we don't deserve. So important to understand this. Because when we really can wrap our minds around grace, this is why we're doing this series, because when we can really together wrap our minds around grace, what it is and what it means, grace has the power to transform, renew, and propel us towards freedom. Don't we all want freedom? Don't we all want to be free from the things that hold us down? That's why grace is so important. Not on its own, but grace embraced. When we embrace it, when we understand it, when we really grab hold of what it means for God to have grace, it can transform everything. It could change everything. It can give us freedom from things like shame or guilt or fear, freedom from fear of the future, freedom from fear of failure. We can walk knowing that there is a God who gives us what we don't deserve anyway, that there's nothing we could do to earn it. And when we embrace this, when we truly grab hold of grace, another thing that we can find, this applies to our life and our story, another thing that happens for us is something called redemption. Redemption happens when we fully embrace grace. We can fully embrace that God is giving us something we don't deserve. That empowers us to have a different life, for our life to be redeemed. So what is redemption? Redemption is just simply the action of regaining or gaining possession of something in exchange for payment or clearing a debt. So redemption means that there's something given and something else gotten in return. You could kind of think of it like a coupon. That's kind of, I think, one of the best illustrations of redemption. The coupon in and of itself doesn't have any value, any worth, but when you take the coupon to, it's a free taco coupon, and you bring it to Taco Island, they give you a free taco. That's sort of like grace, isn't it? That store owner says, I'm going to take this piece of paper, and you don't deserve this taco. All you have is this little piece of paper, and I'm going to redeem it, and you're going to have a delicious taco. That's sort of what redemption is, I think. I don't know. It's a really simple illustration. But redemption is just simply one thing in exchange for another thing. And when I was a kid, this was my lesson on redemption. My dad's in the back smiling. He loves these machines. He sees them and he gets so joyful. And when I was a kid, he used to bring me to wherever it was that we turned in the cans. And it was so nice of him. He let me keep the $1.25 we got after we cashed in endless amounts of cans. It was so kind of him. But now my dad takes the cans from local church and turns it into coffee. That's a pretty good redemption, isn't it? Yeah, you're taking something that really, when you find a can, like this on the side of the, you guys are thinking I was just going to chug a Coke up here, weren't you? You're wondering why this was here. Now, we have our questions answered. That's good. But when you find a can like this, in and of itself, it doesn't really have any value, any purpose. Like, it's, if you just found this on the side of the road, it's just an empty can. You're not going to like really do anything with it. But someone out there sees value in this. Now, it may not ever hold a Coke again, right? That would be weird if it like held another ice cold. I'm not a Coke drinker, but I do drink Diet Coke, all right? This is never going to hold an ice cold Coke again, but that is what redemption does. It takes something like this. You see no value in it. I see no value in it. I have no use for this. And redemption makes it become something better, something new. Did you know that, I looked this up because I was curious, like what do recycled cans become after they're redeemed? And they become things like car parts, window frames, what else? Electrical parts. They're used for something with so much better purpose, really, than it's sitting on the shelf with the Coke in it. Something that lasts, something useful to our everyday lives. That's incredible. That's what redemption looks like. It looks like somebody seeing value and accepting something as payment and giving us something else. So you take this in, you get your money, whatever, this becomes something incredible. And that is sort of like what God did for us. He accepted Jesus as payment because he saw value in us. He saw what we could become. He saw our potential, and he redeemed us with Jesus as that payment. I don't know, it's a simple illustration, but I'm hoping it helps you grasp the idea of redemption and grace. That at the end of the day, despite your past, despite your flaws, your past failures, despite it all, God sees you and sees value. You know, some of you, I think, might think of yourselves like those cans that get completely crushed, right? And you go to redeem it, and it just like tumbles around in there, and then it spits it out. Is anyone going around thinking that that's how God views you? Like a tumbled up can? He still finds value, even in our crumpled up can life. And today, we're going to look at a story that illustrates this to us, and it's the story of a man named Saul. You may have heard of him before, or you might be confused, like, did I spell this wrong? Because you've heard of another guy named Paul, and they're actually the same exact person. Saul and Paul are the same exact person, all right? They just go by two different names. And if you're wondering why, like, why would one person have two names? It's because of culture. Culturally, Paul, the name Saul is like a Jewish name, but the name Paul is a Greek or a Latin name. So when Paul, or Saul, however, goes and starts speaking to like Roman people or Greek people, he uses a name that's more culturally appropriate, like just to be relevant. Like that's literally why he has a different name. And I encountered this recently when we went on our mission trip to Brazil. Our missionary there, his name is Nathan. But in Brazil, they call him Nathan. Yeah? You ever hear of like Juan and Jose or John? It's kind of similar concept, right? Pedro is the same as Peter. Do I have that? So you go to another culture, you have another name. All right. This is not significant. I just want you to know, because when you see, we get into the scriptures and you see Saul and I'm saying Paul and you're like, what is she talking about? Same person, all right? So we're not going to be confused about that. Correct? All right, good. Now, Mike talked a little bit about Paul last week. Last week, we looked in the book of Ephesians at some words that Paul wrote, and I think that Mike even said, this week, we'll be talking about Paul. And we are, and we're going to look at his story in a book called Acts. Acts, I know when you hear Acts, you might think like Acts, but it's Acts. Gosh, it sounds exactly the same. Great, that's great. But this is like acts, like actions, the actions of a group of people. That's what the book of Acts is. It's just like a recording. In fact, it's written by a man named Luke. Luke was one of Jesus's first followers. In fact, there's a gospel, which is like an account of Jesus's life, written by Luke. And it goes hand in hand with Acts, also written by Luke. Acts is just after Jesus's resurrection, the story after he resurrects. So it's like, what are these first followers of Jesus doing? And it's a great book for us to read because it tells us what to do. It informs us on what Jesus followers do. You look back to the first Jesus followers, you start to realize what they should do. So Luke is writing this book of Acts, and in chapter 8, he tells us about the miracles that Jesus' followers are doing. They're like healing people, feeding people, whatever. He's going on about how they're caring and loving and serving one another. They're doing these incredible things. But he has something to say in chapter 9. In chapter 9, he says, meanwhile, Saul, or Paul, was uttering threats with every breath and was eager to kill the Lord's followers. I think this is a little dramatic. Threats with every breath, like that's a lot of threats. But at the end of the day, he was setting the stage for us. He was helping us to see who Saul really was. He was somebody who wanted to eliminate all of the Christians, and he had a plan for how he was going to do it. And this is his plan. Saul went to the high priest. He requested letters addressed to the synagogues in Damascus, asking for their cooperation in the arrest of any followers of the way he found there. So not only does Saul completely hate and disagree with Jesus' followers, he has a plan to eliminate them. Like he's created this plan. I'm going to go to the synagogue, I'm going to find these people, I'm going to hunt them down, arrest them, and watch them be murdered. In fact, there's history in earlier chapters of Acts. There's history, recordings of him standing by as Jesus' followers were stoned, like just watching the situation happen. Like this is a dark guy. You know, when you talk about a crumpled up can, you know, you would think this guy would spin around in that machine and be spit out by God, right? This doesn't sound like somebody whose words we would now read today. So how does a man who was known, his whole reputation was persecuting Christians, become one of the most famous Jesus followers ever? How does that happen? How do you go from wanting to like wipe out the memory of Jesus to dedicating your life to telling people about him? How does that happen? So here's what happens. As he was approaching Damascus on his little mission, a light from heaven suddenly shone down around him. Now, this is frightening for anyone here who's ever thought God would strike them with lightning, because you're like, oh, he does that? Like, I thought that was just a joke, and now you're nervous. Well, I don't know. This sounds a lot like being struck by lightning. I don't know. I wasn't there. But either way, it made a huge impact on his life, as we're about to see. This is a turning point for Paul. This is a turning point in his life. This is one of those things that happens, and you like now have a story to tell at every party. Like, I was walking on my way, and I was struck down by this light. And it doesn't end there. He fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Except I imagine it was like, Saul, Saul. Like, I don't know, that's how I read it. Like frightening, like booming voice coming out like from the sky. It stops you in your tracks. If this happened, I mean, could you guys imagine this happening to you? Like, I feel like I'd pass out. There'd be no more to this story. Like, that would be that. But Paul replies, he says, who are you? Saul asked, and the voice replied, I am Jesus, the one you are persecuting. Now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do. This is the turning point of his life. And if you are somebody, this is kind of a side note, but if you're somebody who has resisted maybe turning to God, to following Jesus, because you're worried that if you do, he's going to like hold you account for all the things you've done, he's going to like rub your face kind of in your shame and your mess. Again, this is sort of a side note, but I want you to realize that this verse, this interaction right here shows us how God, his grace, he's not holding this account of us. If you turn to him even today, he's not looking to rub your face into your shame and make you feel guilty for it. It's redemption. He wants to redeem you because he sees value in you, and he saw value in Paul. He really is saying, like, I have big plans for you. I need you to get up and get on going. I'm going to use you in a big, big way. And Paul does not let his guilt, his shame get in the way. Saul picks himself up off the ground, but when he opened his eyes, he was blind. So his companions led him by the hand to Damascus. He's blind because of the light, right? Like the light blinded him. And he has to be led all the way to the next town. Now, you might be asking like, well, wait, how is that grace? Like, couldn't he have just had the conversation without blinding the guy, you know? And the answer is God can do whatever he wants to do. He could do whatever he wants to do. And if he can do whatever he wants to do, the better question is, why didn't he just strike Paul down right there? Like, why didn't he just eliminate him from the face of the earth right then and there? Why did he even bother? Because without grace, if grace isn't in the picture, everyone should get what they deserve. And Paul deserves to be eliminated if he is an enemy of God, right? If there was no grace in the picture, if God isn't who we know him to be, wouldn't he just eliminate him? Some of you, you have a hard time saying that, but inside, you do feel like there are some people who don't deserve grace. Some of you think you struggle with grace because you think that everyone should get what they deserve. Grace is getting what you don't deserve. But some of us struggle with grace because we're like, no. Everyone needs to get what they deserve. Like, it's in our human nature. You don't have to teach kids this, right? Anyone ever spend time around kids and you give them you have a group of children and you give them snacks and one person's snack is bigger than another? What do you hear? That's not fair, right? That's not fair. We have it in us that we need fairness, and that makes grace hard. But what you need to realize is if God's going to be fair and if he's going to give everyone what they deserve, that includes you. That includes me. That means that anytime we lie, we cheat, we steal, we talk badly about somebody, anytime we do anything that we know is wrong, even though we know what is right, that means we should get what we deserve if there's no grace, if things have to be fair. But God never said things needed to be fair. And that's something that I love about God. I admire it. I love it. Things don't have to be fair. God gives us what we don't deserve. God gives us what we don't deserve. When we make choices that cause pain to other people, when we make choices that hurt others, hurt ourselves, that lead us into a dark pit, when we hurt people that God loves, when we plan it out and execute it, he gives us what we don't deserve. Now, what you really have to see what happened with Paul is that he didn't just get grace in that moment. His whole life was redeemed. Everything from that point forward, because he truly embraced grace. His mission changed, his plans changed, and his life changed. He had an encounter with Jesus. He had an encounter with Jesus. That's what happened on that road to Damascus, and that's what changed everything. When he encountered Jesus, he encountered grace, and it changed him. Now, that could happen for us, but we have to do what Paul did, what Saul did, whoever you want to call him. Here's what he did. He picked himself up, and he accepted God's grace. That's how his life was changed. Just knowing that God's handing you an undeserved gift is nothing if you don't accept it and open it. If you missed part 1 of this series, I recommend that you go back and listen to it because Michael will talk more about what it looks like to accept God's grace. In that message, he even includes a prayer you can pray to kind of mark the moment that you decided to get yourself up, pick yourself up, and allow God to use you. In his illustration, he also talked about, the life ring, like that God, his grace is kind of like a life ring that gets thrown to you. And that's true. You have to choose to grab that life ring, and that's exactly what Paul did. To the point that we read his words today, to the point that he spent his life telling people about Jesus. He planted churches that planted churches that planted churches that led to all of us sitting here in this room today because he embraced God's grace. It's fun that rhymes, but really what he embraced it. He let it change him and redeem his life to a whole new purpose. And now it was about 30 years after his encounter, he even wrote about God's grace. He said to the church in Ephesians, he said, "By God's grace and his mighty power, I have been given the privilege of serving him by spreading the good news." Maybe he's thinking, I could be doing anything. I could have power. I could have influence. I was a pretty important guy before Jesus. But the privilege of my life is that his grace showed me a different way, showed me a new way. God's grace turned his life around. He goes on and says, though I am the least deserving of all God's people, he knows his place, he knows what he was up to before, he graciously gave me the privilege of telling the Gentiles, or those who don't know God, about the endless treasures available to them in Christ. This is like his life statement. He went from somebody trying to wipe out the memory of Jesus to viewing his ministry, his ability to talk about him, as a privilege because of grace. Paul understood grace. He knew it wasn't earned. He knew that his past didn't change the fact that God saw him and saw value. And he restored him to a place of hope and peace and grace, overwhelmed his life and changed it forever. But when I think about Paul, I have to be honest, there's one question that we still have here is, why did God choose Paul? Why choose Paul of all people? He could have chose somebody like Peter or even Luke, who's writing the story. Like, he could have chose someone who's already following him to be the person that would change everything, right? Like, he could have chosen somebody else. So why bother? Paul is sketchy. He's got like a dark past. Why even bother? What's the point? I think he chose Paul for those of us who view ourselves as too far gone. For those of us who view ourselves as having no more value and no more worth, who think God would never bother with me. That's why he chose Paul. He had a point to make to those of us who look at our lives and say, it's too late for me. I've lived 50, 60 years. There is no hope of me turning things around now. I'm unredeemable. I'm a crushed can. Nobody will take me. No one would bother. But if God would bother with Paul, God would bother with you. He would bother with you. You are not out there with a plan to wipe his memory from the earth. I think he has time and grace for you too. Because God is the God of second chances. He has second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth chances because of grace. It's undeserved, but he's got it. And I think another reason why he chose Paul was for those of us here in the room who struggle to extend grace to others. For those of us who look at the world around us and we judge it, and we say, these people don't deserve patience. These people don't deserve kindness or love. These people don't deserve grace. I think he chose Paul so that those of us who struggle to extend grace would see that nobody is beyond it. Nobody is beyond God's grace. He chose Paul so that we could see what grace really looked like and get the point. Now, if you are in that boat, and I'm there too, I struggle to extend grace, especially to my enemies, people that have hurt me, people that have wronged me, people that believe differently than me, people who act different than me. It's hard to give them things they don't deserve. We want to give them the things they do deserve. Maybe an attitude. We want to give them a cold shoulder. We want to give them hate. But there's another person in Paul's story that I want to share with you. Again, just to encourage those of you who are like me and struggle oftentimes with grace. So here's the next guy. His name's Ananias. And Luke tells us there was a believer in Damascus named Ananias. The Lord spoke to him in a vision, calling, Ananias. And he said, yes, Lord. Or was it like this, Ananias. I don't know. Anytime God speaks in the Bible, it's that, okay? But anyway, this is a guy who is a Jesus follower, Ananias, all right? He believes in the early church, they called it the way. He believes in the way. He follows Jesus. He accepts that he, died and resurrected, all of that. And from the outside, it would look like, all right, this guy's got his life together. He knows what it's like to follow Jesus. But Jesus has a lesson for him to learn, and us too, because he goes on to say, the Lord said, go over to Straight Street, not Curvy Street, to the house of Judas. When you get there, ask for a man from Tarsus named Saul. He is praying to me right now. He goes on to say, I have shown him a vision of a man named Ananias, that's you, coming in and laying hands on him so he can see again. Remember how he had been blind after the lightning strike? And he said, like, go to Damascus. I have got something for you there. God chose Ananias to be the hand of grace, just extend it out to Paul. He chose Ananias to be the guy to throw the life ring. And here's how Ananias replies. But Lord, exclaimed Ananias, I've heard many people talk about the terrible things this man has done to the believers in Jerusalem. Like, dude, what are you thinking? I am not going anywhere near that guy. Do you realize that he's in this town to find people like me and arrest us and kill us? I'm not going to I'm not going out to Paul. I'm not going to see this guy. Absolutely not. He's probably thinking, oh, he's blind? That's great. That's great. If he's blind, he can't find me. He can't see me. That's not how it works with God. That wasn't a good enough answer for God, all right? Because he's about to show Ananias what it really looks like to be one of his followers. The Lord said, go, for Saul is my chosen instrument to take my message to the Gentiles and to the kings, as well as to the people of Israel. It's like, this is going to be hard for you, Ananias, and I get that. But this is what it looks like to be my follower. If you want to call yourself a Jesus follower, you're going to need to throw the life ring to your enemy. You're going to need to extend grace, because grace is about giving what's not deserved to others. When you show patience in the face of persecution, when you show love in the face of hate, that's what it looks like to follow Jesus. And that's what we're learning here from Ananias. So, Ananias went and found Saul. He did it. The unimaginable. He was obedient. He didn't know how the story was going to end. He probably imagined it was going to end with him killed. He could have been, but he did it anyway. He did it anyway. Do you struggle with this? Do you struggle with extending grace to others? If so, I've got a question. Who is God asking you to throw a life ring to? Will you just try it? Who is he asking you to have grace with? What will it take for you to actually throw that life ring out? To actually give that person the chance to have a transformed life. That's what Ananias did for Paul. Extending that grace, not his own grace, but the grace of God through him, gave Paul the chance to live a completely different life, for the whole trajectory of his future to change. God wanted to include Ananias in that story. You get that? He could have had this conversation all on his own with Paul, but he decided to include Ananias just the same way he wants to include you in someone else's story of redemption, of life change, of grace. He wants to use you as the arm reaching off the boat to pull somebody back in. So when Ananias did this, instantly, something like scales fell from Saul's eyes, and he regained his sight. Then he got up and was baptized, became a follower of Jesus, because of his encounter with Jesus on that road, and also because of Ananias being faithful, being obedient, to do what Jesus followers do, to love his enemy, to extend grace. So you might just be one conversation, one prayer away from this happening for somebody in your life. I hope that you will do it. But who do you relate to in this story? There's two sides here. There's two different kind of perspectives here. Do you relate to Paul? Do you need to accept God's grace? Are you bogged down by your own shame and your own grief that you haven't even looked at God extending his hand, seeing value and worth in you? Or do you relate to Ananias, who needed to extend grace to others? Are you sitting in God's grace like, yes, God, I am your favorite, and I'm so thankful for all the things you give me, but then you turn to your neighbor and all you have for them is what they deserve? When they're angry with you, you give anger back. Do you need to extend grace? Whichever one you can relate to, I hope that this story inspires you to see what can happen when we accept God's grace and when we choose to extend it. So there's one last story I want to close with about a guy you may or may not have heard of, but it's a man that I think found himself in both spots. Like he found himself needing to accept God's grace and he found himself needing to extend it. He was a man born 1700 years after Jesus, all right, so a little more modern, than Paul's story, but maybe you'll relate with this. This guy's name was John Newton, not like Newton's law. I know, like, when I hear Newton, that's all I think from science. I don't even know what Newton's law is. What goes up must come down? No? All right, we don't know. That's fine. That's not the guy. All right, this guy was born in 1775. He was actually born into a slave trading family, which means he was raised on slave ships, picking up slaves from one place, bringing them to another. And when he was old enough, he traded slaves of his own. He operated ships that were selling people. It's a pretty dark place to grow up. It's a pretty dark job to have. But that was John Newton's life. He had many voyages, trading slaves. He was a pirate. He stole goods off of ships going between the Africa and the Caribbean, or between Africa and England. He was an Englishman, so mostly his routes were up the coast of Africa or across the Middle Passage. Well, in 1745 or something, I don't know. At some point, he finds himself, no, it couldn't have been that, it was after that, he was not born yet. But at some point, right, he finds himself on a ship called Pegasus. All right, he's on this ship called Pegasus, and his crew hates him. So guess what they do? Sell him as a slave. And he becomes a slave to a woman who was the princess of like what's now Sierra Leone, like that area. It was where he becomes a slave. And he's rescued out of that. I actually love this. It was like a Taken situation. His dad enlists a team to go find him and save him, real life, all right? They rescue him out of that slavery, and he's sailing up the coast to Ireland. And while he's on that boat, after his rescue mission happened, he's on that boat, and this horrible storm happens, threatening his life. Like, he thinks he's going to die. This is like the light shining from heaven, struck by lightning moment in John Newton's life. And in that storm, he's like on his knees, like, God, please save me, help me. And as you might imagine, his ship did make it to Ireland, to land. And from that moment forward, he began his journey as a follower of Jesus. Everything didn't change right away, all right? It took time for things to change for him. But eventually, he became an abolitionist, and he fought for the end of slavery in England. And by the time he died in 1807, right before his death, he got to see the Slave Trade Act signed in by Parliament that would eliminate slavery in England. Isn't that amazing? God's grace. He accepted God's grace and allowed it to transform his life and redeem his story. When you look him up now on Wikipedia, the first line you see isn't horrible, wretched, slave trader. That's not what you see. You hear about his influence after he was redeemed, because he went on to write hymns and literature all about what it looks like to follow Jesus. In fact, he wrote these words in a hymn: "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me." He knew who he was without God, without God's grace, and he considered God's grace amazing. He said, "I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see." This is the story of grace. This is what underscores our entire faith. The concept that we could be lost to guilt, to shame, to pain, to anger, to fear, but through grace be found. That we could see ourselves as no value, no worth, but through grace see how much God loves and values us anyway. Our lives could be completely turned around. So whether you are someone who relates to Paul or to Ananias. My hope is that you would be able to take whatever step God has in your journey with grace. So I'm going to pray, and we're actually going to have a chance to sing this song here together. So the band's going to come up, but I want to pray for you while they do. So God, we love you so much. We're so thankful for your grace. When we deserve shame, when we deserve pain, when we deserve to not ever have a relationship with you, you extend your arm, you throw us that life ring, and you redeem our lives. God, I pray for every single person in this room who has doubts about who you are and how you see them. I ask that you would overwhelm them with a sense of how much you love them and value them, just how they are. That they would stop striving to be better, that they would stop working so hard to earn your favor, and that they'd realize it's just right there. I pray that those people would be able to just reach out their hand and grab yours so that their life could be changed. And I pray for those of us who've followed Jesus for a long time, and we have this grace concept under wraps. We know that we've gotten a gift we don't deserve. I ask that you would help us, embolden us to extend grace to people in our lives. Would you bring faces and names to our minds of people that we need to extend grace to, who you're asking us to throw the life ring to, and that we'd stop making excuses and just start looking like your son Jesus to those people. We thank you so much for your amazing grace, and we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Well, hey, I want to thank you so much for spending this time with us. And before you go, I would love for you to consider engaging with local church in 3 additional ways. The first is to fill out a Connect card. No matter where you are in the world, we would love for you to do this. It'll only take you about 30 seconds, and it's just an easy way for us to get to know you a bit more and to serve you better, and for you to get to know us a little better as well. Just click the link in the description to get started. The second way that you can engage with local church is by visiting us in person. If you're local and you don't regularly participate in a church community, we would love to invite you to join us every Sunday. Resources like this can do a lot for our faith personally, but Jesus teaches that God does something unique for our faith when we choose to gather corporately. Click the link in the description to plan your visit. And finally, if you've been positively impacted by local church in any way, would you consider making a tax-deductible donation? Content like this, along with everything that goes on around here, is only made possible by the generosity of people just like you. You can click the link in the description or visit localchurchli.com/give. So, once again, thank you so much. We hope that you found this content helpful and inspiring, and we're so honored to be a part of your faith journey.